Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are in the Ascent of Life, chapter 21, page 213, beginning with the line, "Therefore life is predestined by its own nature."
So, we'll read the para first, and then if necessary we'll come back. Therefore, life is predestined by its own nature to a third status, a third set of terms of its self-expression. If we examine this ascent of life, we shall see that the last terms of its actual evolution, the terms of that which we have called its third status, must necessarily be in appearance the very contradiction and opposite, but in fact the very fulfillment and transfiguration of its first conditions. Life starts with the extreme divisions and rigid forms of matter, and of this rigid division, the atom, which is the basis of all material form, is the very type. The atom stands apart from all others, even in its union with them, rejects death and dissolution under any ordinary force, and is a physical type of the separate ego, defining its existence against the principle of fusion in nature. But unity is as strong a principle in nature as division. It is indeed the master principle, of which division is only a subordinate term, and to the principle of unity, every divided form must therefore subordinate itself in one fashion or another by mechanical necessity, by compulsion, by assent or inducement. Therefore, if nature for her own ends, in order principally to have a firm...
For her combinations?
That's coming
Sorry,
later on.
I missed it somewhere. Therefore nature, for her own then, sorry. Order, right.
Therefore, if nature for her own ends, in order principally to have a firm basis for her combinations and a fixed seed of forms, allows the atom ordinarily to resist the process of fusion by dissolution, she compels it to subserve the process of fusion by aggregation. The atom, as it is the first aggregate, is also the first basis of aggregate unities. So, there's one basic principle that we have to keep in mind always. To every force there's an equal and opposite force in the universe. That's a very important principle. Even science is telling you that. To every action, an equal and opposite reaction. That's why you have the dualities in the physical world. If there's good, there's evil. If there's hot, there's cold. If there is generosity, then there is miserliness. Everything is there, psychologically as well as physically. So, keep this in mind because this is what he will also discuss.
I have to ask about fission.
About fission?
Yeah, because we have nuclear fusion. He speaks
right.
about fusion. What about fission, the splitting of the atom?
Yes, that's right. Both the things are there. So one mother says fission is not such a good thing.
Exactly.
And she said that fusion is a better source of
Fusion
energy.
is better because it's a joining.
Atom rejects death and dissolution. So the principle of the atom is to oppose the fission.
That's right.
It is not allowing it. It is having a tendency to hold itself together.
And you are still forcing it to.
And if you bombard it, then it fissures.
Yeah.
And then there is excessive energy.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
Another one more question. He is speaking about the atom here with such authority. And as far as I have read or heard about him, Sri Aurobindo, he didn't study science in in his school or college.
Listen, science is the most superficial knowledge.
Right.
He is going right to the source of all knowledge. Right. So how can he not know? Right. And also, spiritual knowledge includes scientific knowledge. Right. So in fact, there are so many statements here which scientists have used to show that their principles are right.
So science is what we call apara vidya in the
Yes,
Mundaka Upanishad.
the study of matter and life to a certain. The biology is the study of life, but it is also science. Science has still not come to the study of mind. They have just started. There is a lot of research going on for mind.
And somebody pointed out to me that in Savitri you can find words like photon, electron.
Oh yes,
Oh, yes.
yes, absolutely. He was
Well,
very.
there's a whole section on the photons and electrons.
Yeah.
A marvelous section.
Even proton, photon, electron,
Yes,
all these
yes,
subatomic
yes.
particles he has mentioned
Yes.
in his writings.
Yes, in Savitri.
Each individual cell is so much intelligence.
Pardon?
Each individual cell is so much intelligence.
Is
Physical
Huh.
intelligence.
Intelligence is there inherent in it. It is there lying unconscious. In matter, consciousness is not awakened. It is there inherent. It is there potential. He has told you earlier that there is a will in the atom. We study the chart, you will see that there is a subconscious will or something he's saying.
Right.
In the first one in there,
Yes.
subconscious force or something. There is also a thing, will, something to do with will.
Force-driven subconscious will.
There you are. In the atom, there is subconscious will. Whatever is there in the higher levels of consciousness in Satchidananda is there in matter but hiding. That is in light, this is in darkness. It is symmetric. But symmetry is a mirror image rather. Symmetrical but mirror image.
Sri Aurobindo often uses the word sleeping. It's sleeping.
Yes, exactly. Sleeping. And when life comes in, he uses the word somnambulism.
Yes, yes.
Sleepwalking. There is consciousness and there is also unconsciousness. Therefore, life is predestined by its own nature to a third status, a third set of terms for its self-expression. The third set of terms is the mind, which we studied in the chart. So, and he's saying, therefore, life by its own nature, because he has told you very clearly, nature, there is a, and this, what is the word he's using? Some force, he's using the word mechanical unconscious force which is there. It becomes mutual devouring and but there is a hunger and a conscious desire. The dumb energy of physical energy, the dumb urge of physical energy in matter becomes conscious desire. It's a desire which is pushing. So there is a conscious desire. That is exactly what he's saying. So by its very nature, it has to go to mind. It's pushing upwards. So, by its very nature, a third status. If we examine this ascent of life, we shall see that the last terms of its actual evolution, the terms of that which we have called its third status, must necessarily be in appearance the very contradiction and opposite, but in fact the very fulfillment and transfiguration of its first conditions. So we spoke of the opposites. So in matter, what is there? As it keeps going up, it becomes the opposite. At the lower level, if there is unconsciousness, it is going towards consciousness. If there is a dumb urge, it becomes a conscious desire. Everything becomes the opposite. So,
But he calls it not opposite, but a transfiguration.
yes, that's right.
Beautiful.
Very fulfillment and transfiguration of its first conditions. Fulfillment and transfiguration. That which is potential in matter comes out halfway in life and becomes full in mind. Life starts with the extreme divisions and rigid forms of matter. Life, he's saying life is starting from matter, that's what he's saying, and extreme divisions and rigid forms of is matter. And of this rigid division, the atom, which is the basis of all material form, is the very type. The atom stands apart from all others, even in its union with them. So, rejects death and dissolution under any ordinary force and is the physical type of the separate ego, defining its existence against the principle of fusion in nature. In matter, there is division. In life, the principle of fusion starts becoming apparent, because as soon as you have life, any living creature is a aggregation or a conglomeration, if you want, of atoms coming together, molecules, and then giving a living form. So the aggregation becomes apparent in life, but it is not so in matter. Matter is the principle of division. As it keeps going up, the principle of unity and coming together increases. It goes on increasing. Just now we spoke about two opposite forces. So in matter, the force which is the most dominant is division. As you keep rising, the force that is the most dominant becomes unity, union. And that's why in the mental regions you have cosmic consciousness. You become universal. The whole world is only yourself, universal. Division disappears and unity starts appearing. Yesterday we were discussing the opposite forces that are there, Purusha, Prakriti. So exactly the same thing. All these applies, the same principle applies to everything. Yesterday when we were discussing, I thought of another example which I didn't see yesterday. You were speaking about determinism, fate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So at the lowest level, we have determinism and fate operates. As you keep going up and your soul escapes from body, mind, life, it is free. Now that's exactly what happens in the physical world. You have the gravitation which is pulling you down. You have no freedom. You are subjected to gravitation. You keep going up, 100 miles you go up into the sky, you are free, you float. No law, you are free. Exactly the same principle operates for your soul also.
Mm-hmm.
As you keep going higher and higher, freedom. As you keep coming lower and lower, slavery. And subjection to law.
Wonderful example.
That's exactly it.
I just thought of a line in Savitri. The riven, invisible atom's omnipotent force.
Yes.
What does ribbon mean?
Ribbon means broken.
Broken.
The ribbon means...
That's a rift from that ribbon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, he has spoken about the opposite forces. So, as you keep going up, the opposite starts becoming more and more obvious. The cosmic consciousness in the mind level is possible. So, the atom stands apart from all others, even in its union with them, rejects death and dissolution under any ordinary force, and is the physical type of the separate ego. Yesterday we were discussing individuality and ego, and in the atom, individuality is the physical ego. That which makes it separate from everybody else. It's separate. The psychological ego is not there in the atom, but the physical egoism is there. Separation. Individual.
That's what I was asking yesterday.
Yesterday you were asking that. And I thought of another answer to you yesterday which I did not say. The word individual, you have to understand, they are all coming in a crowd. You say, please come to me individually. So individually means separately, one by one. So individuality means separation. But ego is that which makes you feel separate. So there is a difference between ego and individuality. At our level, we mix up the two. We feel that our ego is the individuality. But as soon as you go up out of your body, mind, life into the self, ego has disappeared. You feel yourself to be infinite. But individuality is there. So this individuality has become cosmic. Again, it's a little puzzling. So again, another image to show how this can happen. Take a grain of salt. It's got a fixed form, individual. Put it into a glass of water. The form disappears, but the saltiness does not disappear. The individual has become universal. So, individuality is always there. Even in this Purushottama, individuality as well as universality. The personal aspect of the divine as well as the universal aspect, impersonal aspect of the divine. Both are there in the Purushottama consciousness.
Just as the nature of the grain of salt would be saltiness, our true nature would be Ananda.
The same thing, yeah. Okay, so we come back. That we have read. But unity is as strong a principle in nature as division. It is indeed the master principle, of which division is only a subordinate term. There you are. Because at the highest level, God is unity. So, the other terms here are subordinate terms of that. They are really that. Just now, as he said, Sat becomes matter, so matter is a subordinate form of Sat. Chit Shakti becomes life here, conscious force becomes life, but life is a subordinate form of conscious force. That's what he's saying. So there it is, and they are sort of mirror images. It's like the right becomes left. There it is light, here it becomes dark. There it is formless, here it becomes form. There it is one, here it becomes infinite multiplicity. Mirror image. But they are very, very similar in many ways. The inconscient and the subconscious are two poles which are very similar in many ways. Both are infinite, both are seed forms, both are formless. From there also there is a seed, is the seed form of coming down, it's creating. From here also matter also is creating. So both are creative agents.
The inconscient is a creative agent.
Yes, because everything is there inherent in it. The involution has gone into the inconscient, from there it's coming out. You can't strictly say that the inconscient is creating, because it's the consciousness which is embedded in inconscience which is creating.
Yes, and Mother has that extraordinary experience. At the very bottom of the inconscient, most hard and rigid
And stifling.
and narrow and stifling, I struck upon an almighty spring that cast me up forthwith into a formless, limitless void, vibrating
Yes.
with the seeds of a new world.
Yes, exactly.
Formless, limitless, vast.
Vast, so vibrating with the seeds of a new world. Yeah.
In other words, there is a connection between them. When you start from one, you will not go to the opposite, you will come back to the same point. There is all a connection between
I
them.
think there's a sonnet of Sri Aurobindo also titled Shiva, the Inconscient Creator. I think there's one such sonnet.
Ah,
So the same thing.
Yeah.
The inconscient being the creative aspect of the inconscient.
yeah. Okay, so there is, and these two forces are always opposite to each other and they are having influence on each other. There is a force that pulls up, there is a force that pulls down. In science as well as in psychological matters also, there is resistance, but there is also aspiration to go up. They are opposite forces. And you have to lean more towards one, and then slowly, slowly, there is a small, subtle change that comes. The law of resistance and the law of slow change. So they use these words in one essay. The law of resistance is there and the law of change, progress also is there. Okay, so by compulsion, so this is an interesting thing what he's saying, we'll discuss this. But unity is as strong a principle in nature as division. Both are existing all the time. It is indeed the master principle of which division is only a subordinate term, and to the principle of unity everywhere, divided form must therefore subordinate itself in one fashion or another by mechanical necessity, by compulsion, by assent or inducement.
I like that inducement.
Yes. So, principle of unity, divided form must therefore subordinate itself to principle. Unity must. Now, it's interesting if you give me examples, just to think, because Sremda is using this term. How does unity come about by compulsion? How does it come about by assent? How does it come about by inducement? It's interesting. Even at the political level, if you see, okay, it operates. By compulsion, one country conquers another and there is unity. Okay? So, psychologically also, when you are going more and more, that is the effort that you make. Again, the same principle applies.
Even inducement.
Yes?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. You induce one to come into the other. Okay. So, and he covers the whole ground when he speaks like this, 3 adjectives, 4 adjectives, he gives each subtle and he covers the whole ground always. So, the unity can take place by compulsion, by assent or inducement. Therefore, if nature for her own ends in order principally to have a firm basis for her combinations and a fixed seed of forms, allows the atom ordinarily to resist the process of fusion by dissolution, she compels it to subserve the process of fusion by aggregation. So, as soon as life comes in, there is aggregation of atoms and molecules. So, life is dissolution and matter is dissolution and disaggregation. Life is aggregation. The opposite force comes in. The atom, as is the first aggregate, is the first basis of aggregate unities. It is the first basis, and when it comes to life, it is compelled to unite with the other to make molecules and living forms. No living form can be without the aggregation of molecules. There has to be. So, we go to the next para. When life reaches its second status, that which we recognize as vitality, the contrary phenomenon takes the lead, and the physical basis of the vital ego is obliged to consent to dissolution. Very interesting word. We'll discuss it. Its constituents are broken up so that the elements of one life can be used to enter into the elemental formation of other lives. The extent to which this law reigns in nature has not yet been fully recognized, and indeed cannot be until we have a science of mental life and spiritual existence as sound as our present science of physical life and the existence of matter. Still, we can see broadly that not only the elements of our physical body, but those of our subtler vital being, our life energy, our desire energy, our powers, strivings, passions, enter both during our life and after our death into the life existence of others. An ancient occult knowledge tells us that we have a vital frame as well as a physical, and this too is after death dissolved and lends itself to the constitution of other vital bodies. Our life energies, while we live, are continually mixing with the energies of other beings. A similar law governs the mutual relations of our mental life with the mental life of other thinking creatures. There is a constant dissolution and dispersion and a reconstruction affected by the shock of mind upon mind, with a constant interchange and fusion of elements. Interchange, intermixture, fusion of being with being is the very process of life, the law of its existence. Very interesting paragraph.
Yes.
And we'll look into it in great detail. Think also of the last bit, interchange, intermixture, fusion. What's the difference? Very interesting what he's saying. So, we go back to the beginning of the para. There also is very interesting. When life reaches its second status, which is the second status of life? Life itself. Okay? That which we recognize as vitality, the contrary phenomenon takes the lead, and the physical basis of the vital ego. Now see, the atom has got a physical ego, and the living creature has got a vital ego. When you come to mind, we recognize the ego as we recognize it in human beings. But there is an ego that we separate in physicality, in vitality. But it's a physical ego which is not conscious, separateness. Vital ego, little bit of consciousness is there. Mental ego, Sri says the ego is mainly in the mind. It's a phenomenon of mind. Because after that, after the mind, ego disappears. So, full development of ego up to the mind level. Beyond the mind ego, no ego. Because you become cosmic. Your sense of separation disappears. So, largely, there is a trace of ego that remains, but that's a subject of yoga, not of philosophy. So, when life reaches the second status, that which you recognize as vitality, the contrary phenomenon takes the lead, and the physical basis of the vital ego is obliged to consent to dissolution. So,
That needs more explanation.
yeah, okay. So, when matter reaches the life level, there are physical forms. physical and vital forms. The contrary phenomenon takes the lead, and the physical basis of the vital ego is obliged to consent to dissolution. In matter, the atom resists dissolution. It remains as, it doesn't want to associate with other atoms. That's what you were saying. Okay, you were saying the exactly same thing. But when it comes to life, the atom loses its power to resist unity. That's how living creatures are formed. Every living creature, even if it be a worm, it is matter that is coming together and creating the body of the worm, the body of the... So there is a aggregation. The atom has lost its power to resist. It is forced to come together. The opposite phenomenon takes place, he's saying, in life.
I'm not clear on the vital ego part.
Yeah.
I suppose what it means here is that the physical basis of the vital ego is obliged to consent to dissolution. I mean, if life has come into being, there is accompanying with it the principle of death also.
Yes.
Preceded by dissolution.
Yes.
So, yes.
I'm not sure that that's what is meaning of death. The force to remain separate gets dissolved. I would understand it in that way. And
The
what?
physical basis of the vital ego is obliged to consent to dissolution.
Dissolution of what? That's the whole question.
The physical basis of the vital ego is the physical basis. The physical basis of the vital ego is the body, and the body is obliged to dissolve.
The physical basis of the vital ego is obliged to consent to dissolution. He's explaining. All right, let's take it that way.
Yeah.
To dissolution means death. Death means again, okay, the atom is immortal, and in life you have death. It's the opposite. He's talking in that sense, yes. That you can think of it in that way also. I was thinking also of another way of interpreting this sentence, that the capacity of the atom to resist unity is dissolved. You can say that also is correct, but that's not what he's saying here. He's talking of death only. Because immediately after that, he's explaining what happens in death. Its constituents are broken up so that the elements of one life can be used to enter into the elemental formation of other lives. One living body dissolves and the raw material is used again to make another body. There is a recycling. That's what he's saying. That's what happens. Matter is constantly being recycled. Other bodies are being made. Okay. Narad is having a little bit of a trouble.
No, its constituents are broken.
Yeah. In other words, matter is making a form. The form dissolves and goes back into general matter, and the general matter is again being used to create other forms. That's more accurate. That's it. You can put it that way. Okay. So, the extent to which this law reigns in nature has not yet been fully recognized, and indeed cannot be until we have a science of mental life and spiritual existence as sound as our present science of physical life and the existence of matter. Research into life is going on, research into mind laws also are going on, but they are very far away still from the spiritual field. Still, we can see broadly that not only our elements, the elements of our physical body, but those of our subtler vital being, our life energy, our desire energy, our powers, strivings, passions, enter both during our life and after our death into the life existence of others. This is a phenomenon that Mother always speaks all the time. Other people's thoughts are coming into me, and I am thinking they are my thoughts. Other people's vibrations of emotions are coming into me, and I think that I am. Even anger is contagious. Even anger is contagious. Even energy is contagious. You can enter into company with people who will drain your energy out. Either they suck it out of you, or you get energy from them. So they call them vampires. Those who suck the energy out of us. You will feel yourself depleted absolutely of energy. Sometimes it can happen. Not very common, but it can happen.
On the reverse, I was just reading today about the divine force.
Yes.
How one has to be so pure to accept that divine force to heal someone else.
Yes.
Otherwise, the admixtures come
That's
in.
right.
Yeah. But this is interesting because anything that is not completely, we can say, coalesced in our psychic being is going to go out into the world after we
Yeah.
die.
So,
And if it's coalesced, then what?
Then it goes to its resting place,
Ah.
preparing for the next birth.
So
But
there-
carrying that with it, carrying that experience with it.
so what he's saying is that there's a recycling of matter, formation of bodies, dissolution of bodies. There is a formation and dissolution of the vital stuff also. We have to remember this, that just as there's a universal plane of matter, there is also a universal plane of energy, which you call the life plane, prana we call it in India, which is a life plane which is separate from matter. There also a little bit of vitality is taken and an individual vital is formed. At the end of life, that vitality is dissolved. Sometimes the vitality doesn't dissolve.
Right.
Then you have the phenomena of ghosts and spirits. That's what happens. Because it is a very strong form that has taken place, it's not dissolving so easily. So that is one thing. Mind also, your mental thoughts and all that, the individual mind is a small formation of universal mind. At the end of life, that also dissolves and goes away. That also need not dissolve. Sometimes if the thought is very, very powerful and strong, it tries to enter into other people's minds and revive itself. That also is a fact that happens. So that's why it's recycling at all the levels. That's what Shabda is saying. So, an ancient occult knowledge tells us that we have a vital frame as well as a physical, and this too is after death dissolved and lends itself to the constitution of other vital bodies. Our life energies, while we live, are continually mixing with the energies of other beings. This way, Mother is all the time speaking of that. You are a marketplace, she says. That you are, everything is coming into you, you are not even conscious of it. Other people's emotions are coming into you, other people's thoughts are coming into you, other people's wrong vibrations as well as good vibrations, all are coming into you, you are not even aware of it. That's what he's saying. A similar law governs the mutual relations of our mental life with the mental life of other thinking creatures. There is a constant dissolution and dispersion and a reconstruction effected by the shock of mind upon mind with a constant interchange and fusion of elements. Now, interchange, intermixture, fusion of being with being is the very process of life. It is the law of existence. Interchange. A goes to B, B goes to A. Your thoughts can come to me, my thoughts can go to you. Intermixture. My thought can come into your thought and something new can take place. My thought will go into your thought and transmute your thought. Intermixture.
Yes.
Fusion. The two can mix and become one.
I wonder about sometimes the great geniuses when they passed away.
Yes.
If their minds went into
Yes, if
others.
their minds are very, that's exactly what I was saying, that
Yeah.
their minds don't dissolve.
Right.
They remain in the mental plane as formations and other people can receive them.
Yeah.
It can happen. One example which we know is Jagadish Chandra Bose. He made the first experimentation about the principle of the radio. But he didn't exploit it, he didn't ask for a patent or anything. But 2 years afterwards, Marconi developed the radio and claimed the invention as his own. But Jagadish Chandra Bose has already done that in Calcutta and shown that the principle is there. But he didn't do anything more than that. He made a vibration here, it was received in another place. So that's the principle of the radio. You send out vibrations over here, there is an instrument that receives the vibrations there. He was able to show that in his laboratory in Calcutta. So, and another thing, very interesting. Nowadays, there are science journals being printed all over, researches. Urology, this logy, that logy, scientific physics, atom. So many ideas, new discoveries are always being published. Research papers are being published all the time. Very often, 2 areas or 3 areas are working on the same principle. So there may be an intermixture of these ideas at that level also. That also is possible. So in fact, he's very, very clear. He's saying constant dissolution and dispersion and reconstruction, and this is happening all the time. Interchange, intermixture, fusion of being with being is the very process of life, a law of its existence.
Yes. I remember meeting a yogi who told me that we're like a radio with all the stations on at the same time.
Yes. Whereas it should be one at a time, or there should be no incoming vibrations at all. Then you have a silent mind.
Next para.
Right. So, we go to the next para. We have then two principles in life: the necessity or the will of the separate ego to survive in its distinctness and guard its identity, and the compulsion imposed upon it by nature to fuse itself with others. Opposite forces are there, both are operative. In the physical world, she lays much stress on the former impulse being separate ego to survive. For she needs to create stable separate forms, since it is her first and really her most difficult problem to create and maintain any such thing as a separative survival of individuality and a stable form for it in the incessant flux and motion of energy and in the unity of the infinite. We'll come back to this. In the atomic life, therefore, the individual form persists as the basis and secures by its aggregation with others the more or less prolonged existence of aggregate forms, which shall be the basis of vital and mental individualizations. But as soon as nature has secured a sufficient firmness in this respect for the safe conduct of her ulterior operations, she reverses the process. The individual form perishes, and the aggregate life profits by the elements of that form that is thus dissolved. This, however, cannot be the last stage. That can only be reached when the two principles are harmonized, when the individual is able to persist in the consciousness of his individuality and yet fuse himself with others without disturbance of preservative equilibrium and interruption of survival. Now, these are very interesting words, and you have to think a lot. It took a long time to make out it. Preservative equilibrium, what is the meaning? Interruption of survival, what is the meaning? So we'll discuss that. Okay? So, we go back to the beginning of the para. We have then two principles in life: the necessity or the will of the separate ego to survive in its distinctness and guard its identity, and the compulsion imposed upon it by nature to fuse itself with others. These two opposite forces are there, that we have seen. One is individuality. I don't want to change very easily. Even at the human level, we want to preserve our identity and our character. We don't want to change. But yet, you are forced sometimes to change by circumstances and by nature. If you are in a group, you can't be too egoistic. You'll be forced to change your stand. Okay, so that at our level. But he is talking of at the material and vital level. So, to fuse with others. In the physical world, she lays much stress on the former impulse of separateness. For she needs to create stable separate forms. Since it is her first and really her most difficult problem to create and maintain any such thing as a separative survival of individuality and a stable form for it in the incessant flux and motion of energy and in the unity of the infinite. Now, this requires a little bit of thinking and explanation. We start with the concept that in the physical world there is constant motion. Constant motion is there. Nothing is stable. But if you want to create individuals, you have to have stable forms. How will you create stable forms in a condition where everything is in motion? So that's what he's saying. It is nature manages to maintain that in spite of this stable form that you are seeing is not really stable. It is apparent. take living creatures, okay? Let's go to man only, it's easy. Are you really what you are today? Will you be the same tomorrow? No. And yet the individuality is maintained. That's the interesting part. There is at the physical level, I am eating food and I am rejecting stuff. At the vital level, I am getting new ideas and new feelings and I am throwing out other things also. So there is a constant incoming and an outgoing of forces at the physical level, vital level, mental level. So the individuality is maintained in spite of this change. That's the interesting part. And everything is in flux. This flux is not visible because it's a very slow change. If you see someone after 5 years or you see a tree after 5 years, yes, it has changed. But within one day, 24 hours, you will not see the change, although there is change. So that's what he's saying here. He's saying that nature has this difficult task of maintaining individual forms in a condition where everything is in motion. And yet she manages to do it. So this physical form that is there, it is not really a separate thing. It is constantly changing, but the change is so slow that you don't see the change. You have to see it over a long period of time. Okay, so look at the sentence again. This is exactly what he's saying. We have then two principles in life: the necessity or the will of the separate ego to survive in its distinctness and guard its identity, and the compulsion imposed upon it by nature to fuse itself with others. The force of unity and the force of separation, both are operating. They fight against each other. In the physical field, in the physical world, she lays much stress on the former impulse, the separateness. For she needs to create stable separate forms, since it is her first and really her most difficult problem to create and maintain any such thing as a separative survival of individuality and a stable form for it in the incessant flux and motion of energy and in the unity of the infinite. Now, you can ask, why create stable forms? Just think what will happen if there are no stable forms. Okay, I am talking to you and Narad is not stable form. Now he is Narad, in 2 seconds later on is something else. How will there be a possibility of a orderly life in the physical world? There have to be stable forms. So that's exactly what he's saying. There have to be stable forms, otherwise impossible.
I understood the complexity of the incessant flux and motion of energy, but the phrase the unity of the infinite,
Yeah.
that I didn't understand how.
The infinite is there. The infinite is, there is a unity in it. That famous example of this division that you see is only apparent. That's what it means. The unity that you see, the division that you see is apparent, it's not real. You remember the Gita's... Huh? Vibhaktam eva. That's right. Looks to be divided, but actually it's not divided. There is the underlying unity of the universal. Usually this principle also is shown as with one moon shining in troubled waters, you see multiplicity.
The oneness of the infinite, the infinite is one.
Yes.
But the challenge before nature is to somehow divide that indivisible into
And make
forms.
separate forms,
Right,
stable forms.
right.
And the stable forms, separate
Stable,
forms
stable
are
is-
not really stable. There's a constant mixing with all the other forms. And yet you get a sense of stability. There is no stability in the physical world. So, then, in the atomic life, therefore, the individual form persists as the basis and secures by its aggregation with others the more or less prolonged existence of aggregate forms, which shall be the basis of vital and mental individualizations. Look at that sentence carefully. In the atomic life, therefore, the individual form persists as the basis and secures by its aggregation with others the more or less prolonged existence of aggregate forms. Each aggregate form, some live less, some live longer. That's what is meaning by more or less. Butterflies last 1 week. A cat lives for 10 years, 12 years. Human beings live for 100 years. So there is more or less, that's why he's saying that. Okay? All living creatures have different, more or less, prolonged existence and aggregate forms, which shall be the basis of vital and mental individualizations. Okay? But as soon as nature has secured a sufficient firmness in this respect for the safe conduct of her ulterior operations, she reverses the process. The individual form perishes and the aggregate life profits by the elements of the form that is thus dissolved. Let's try and understand this. The individual form perishes and the aggregate life profits by the elements of the form that is thus dissolved. I can think of one thing. In human life, there is a society and there are individuals. The individual discovers something. Okay, he makes a discovery, let us say. He gets the Nobel Prize, he has discovered something. He disappears. But the aggregate collectivity is profiting by him. He leaves behind something. That is, look carefully at the sentence. The individual form perishes, but the aggregate life profits by the elements of that form. So if it's at the mental level, what he has contributed there remains. At the vital level also, the collectivity is benefiting from the dissolved form that the individual dissolves and it is used for the collectivity. At the material level also it operates, at the vital level also, at the mental level also it operates.
But he's talking at the atomic life.
Yes.
So how would we...
The atomic, but he's also talking of the next he's talking of individualization in life and mind. Na? You see carefully? But as soon as nature has secured a sufficient firmness in respect of the safe conduct of her ulterior operations, life and mind, and even beyond perhaps, okay, she reverses the process. The individual form perishes. In the matter, the individual form doesn't perish. The individual form remains in matter. When it comes to life and mind, reversal. The individual perishes, the collectivity benefits. A little doubt is there because remember he says that in matter the separateness is total. Okay? There is a resistance and the atom is the individual and it is immortal. When it comes to life, it reverses the process. He has said that earlier also. Aggregation, the individuals disappear, but the collectivity benefits. That's what he said. The process is reversed. Okay? Then.
Maybe he means that the constituent atoms of the molecules they dissolve and they reconstitute into something greater.
So the
greater
collectivity
compound.
is benefiting.
A greater compound, yeah.
So the collectivity.
So something greater is created.
Yes.
The original thing is
Yeah.
So this you need to know chemistry very well. I mean,
Huh?
I'm saying to understand this, one has to keep one's eye on chemistry. I mean, this is all.
Not only chemistry, even history, even everything. There are examples at all levels. There's physical level, vital level, mental level.
Nowadays they teach atoms, at least in my time they were teaching atoms as part of chemistry.
So, in fact, just now when I saw this sentence, I have thought even of the mental life also. The individual makes a discovery, he dissolves, but his discovery is the collectivity is benefiting. The same principle is again applying there also. So, this, however, cannot be the last stage. That can only be reached when the two principles are harmonized. Which are the two principles? Individuality and universality. And when does that happen? When you go to the self. When you go to the Brahmic consciousness, your individuality is there as well as your cosmic consciousness. The two are become fused. The two principles are harmonized. When the individual is able to persist in the consciousness of his individuality, yet fuse himself with others without disturbance of preservative equilibrium, interruption of survival. Okay, now, preservative equilibrium, maintenance of individuality with the cosmic consciousness. Preservative equilibrium. Maintenance of individuality with the cosmic consciousness. And interruption of survival, he is meaning death. Interruption of survival is death. Survival is there, interruption, and survival is again there. So that is interruption of survival is death. So,
That is clear, but preservative equilibrium,
yeah.
interruption of survival is clear.
Preservative equilibrium between unity and individuality.
Universality and individuality.
Individuality and universality. Okay? It has to preserve that equilibrium. It can't do that without the interruption of survival. Death has to intervene. The individual, when he is at a cosmic level, he has this preservative equilibrium. So, he has to fuse himself with others without disturbance of preservative equilibrium and interruption of survival. And when can he do that? When he realizes that his soul is immortal and he can remain forever without death. He is individual as well as both universal. There is no death for him anymore. So, this last bit, I think it's not very clear.
No.
Yeah.
Preservative equilibrium is pretty
We'll discuss that again
Not
next
for
time.
me either.
Fuse himself with others without disturbance of preservative equilibrium and interruption of survival.
Is it his preservative equilibrium?
Yes.
The individual's?
Yes, without disturbance.
Maybe there's
the
key.
individual can preserve in himself his individuality as well as his universality without death. Interruption of survival is death. That is clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Interruption of survival is death. So he has to become a divine creature. He becomes universal as well as individual, and yet he is not dying because now there is no death for him. He is immortal. That is what is meant.
So he's not disturbing the preservative equilibrium
He is not
or
disturbing-
the interruption of survival.
That's right. Without death, he can achieve unity of individuality and cosmic consciousness.
It's like if a soul realizes the principle of unity in one life, that realization sort of continues in the next life also, and then the ascension.
Then there is interruption of survival.
Survival, but the unity, that realization is sort of retained.
No. Nili, what he is saying is that this preservation of equilibrium, individuality with universality, must be there without death. So what you are saying is with death.
Yes.
But now he has to do it without death. And when you realize your soul is immortal, you have achieved that.
Okay.
That's what it meant. Without, he's saying, without disturbance of preservative equilibrium and without interruption of survival. When a human being realizes that he is divine, that's what happens. He is not dying anymore and he is constantly in a
Universal consciousness.
universal consciousness with individuality. That's the interesting part.
Yeah. If we go back just a little bit,
Yeah.
the individual is able to persist in the consciousness of his individuality.
Yes.
So now we got it without these other things.
Yes. And he possesses the individuality plus he gets his. But the individuality is not the ego. That we discussed just now. Remember
Right,
that salt.
Right.
It is that individuality is universal. He feels that he is universal. He feels himself to be everywhere. But there is another example also of the Buddhists who say that it is utter nihilism and utter nirvana. There is no individuality also to feel that I am now universal. There is no I am at all there. That sense of I-ness is not there. You become the infinite. That's a Buddhistic goal. That also can happen. Sri Aurobindo has mentioned that.
Yes.
When you are universal, you feel that, oh, I was lodged in a body, now I am universal, I am everywhere. Even that I am everywhere also disappears. That also is possible. But Sri Aurobindo would like you to preserve your individuality and also become immortal.
The Gita asserts that the individual is eternal. The Gita asserts that the individual is eternal.
Can be eternal, yeah.
No, not can be. He is eternal, it says.
That's at our mental level is very difficult. Otherwise, what do you understand by the ascetic disappearing into the infinite? Individuality is there. When the river is coming and flowing and becoming one with the sea, Is there any river in the sea?
I don't know, but I mean,
So that's why when you are at a mental level, these problems are there. But it's possible to have both. So if we insist too much on one aspect, we may not be absolutely correct. What the Gita is saying is absolutely fine.
Could be the individual soul is eternal.
yes, maybe we close that and then.
But the soul is consciousness, and that consciousness can merge into the infinite consciousness. If he wants, he can do that. I think Srimad has mentioned that somewhere. That if you want to do that, fine.
Yes.
He has no objection. But Srimad wants you to maintain your individuality and yet be universal. And not only remain there, but come down into the physical world and help God's work. So, these words are difficult, okay? Preservative equilibrium, you have to understand what he's saying. And again, interruptions. It took a long time to make out what he's saying. Srimada's use of words is very interesting. Okay, we stop here
Thank you,
today.
Ranga. Yes. Namaste.